Hello, we're going to be going through the quadratic formula in Unit 4 today. This is another way of solving quadratic equations, trying to find the roots. This one will work with every single quadratic, no matter what. So a method that works for solving all quadratic equations is using the, let's use this color, quadratic formula. Which is, now it sounds really complicated, but it is not that tough. The quadratic formula says that x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I know you're thinking, where do a, b, and c come from? Well, when you have a quadratic in standard formula, it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you need to be sure to write a quadratic equation in standard form before using the quadratic formula. And I will sing this for you tomorrow if someone asks me. If they don't, it is not my fault. It's a good way to remember it, so I hope that someone asks. We're going to jump right into an example. So we want to solve this quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. So the very first thing you want to do is ask yourself, is it in standard form? This one has our x squared term, followed by our x term, and then our constant term right at the end. So this is in standard form. Then you want to ask yourself, what is a, what is b, and what is c? And I'm going to change my color here so we can see a little better. So a is what's in front. In this case, it's 3. b is what's in front of just the x term, so this is negative 10. And c is going to be whatever's on the end there. In this case, it's a positive 5. So I'd like you to write out the quadratic formula, the whole thing. It's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now we're just going to start plugging in, making sure we use our parentheses. So x equals negative, b in this case is negative 10, plus or minus the square root in parentheses of b, which is negative 10, squared, minus 4, a in this case is 3, c in this case is 5, all over 2, and a in this case is 3. From there, it's just calculating. And I know it looks tough, but negative 10 is going to turn into just 10, plus or minus square root of negative 10 squared is 100, minus 4 times 3 times 5, if you do that in your calculator, is 60. All over 2 times 3 is 6. So it already looks quite a bit simpler. If we take it one step further, we're going to have x equals 10 plus or minus the square root 100. Whoops, don't want to do that. 100 minus 60 is going to be 40 all over 6. We can break that 40 down so that we have x equals 10 plus or minus 40 can be broken down into 4 times 10 all over 6. So x equals 10 plus or minus 2 square root of 10 over 6. And the last step is going to be to reduce that, because we know that 10, 2, and 6 are all even numbers. So we can divide them all by 2, and we'll have x equals 5 plus or minus. If you want to put it, you can put 1 square root of 10 all over 3. And that there should be our final answer. So 5 plus or minus radical 10 over 3. Sometimes they'll ask you to keep it in simplest radical form, which is what this is. Sometimes they will ask you to actually figure it out as a decimal. So there'll be two answers because you'll have to split it into the plus and into the minus. Our next example, we have x squared minus 4x equals negative 4. So your first question should be, let's find a good color here. Let's try this one. Is this in standard form? And you should say to yourself, no, sir, that is not in standard form. So we want to go ahead and get it in standard form by adding 4 to both sides. So we will now have x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 0. A thing of beauty. Now we want to know what is A, what is B, and what is C. A in this case is what's in front here, is a 1. B is a negative 4, and C is a positive 4. So we're going to use the whole formula once again, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we're going to plug everything in now. So we have x equals, in parentheses, negative, our b is negative 4, plus or minus the square root of, parentheses again, negative 4 squared minus 4. A in this case is 1. C in this case is 4. All over 2, and A is 1. So I've just plugged in my A, my B, and my C through everything, and I'm going to simplify it down. So x equals negative negative 4 is positive 4, plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 1 times 4 gives us 16, all over 2 times 1 is 2. Next step, x equals 4 plus or minus the square root. Holy crap! 16 minus 16 is 0. All over 2. So in this case, x is 4 plus or minus 0 over 2, which is just 4 over 2, which is just el dos, which is what your final answer is. Interesting thing about that, if you look at the original, which was x squared minus 4x plus 4, you could actually take that and factor it, and you would have gotten x and x, minus 2 and minus 2, and if that was equal to 0, you would factor t-bar that and get x equals 2, which is actually the exact same thing that we just figured out with the quadratic formula. So this will work for every single equation, whether you can factor it or not. The last example here. I'm not going to write it out this time, but you need to ask yourself, is this in standard form? The answer to this would be no. So we're going to actually have to subtract 2x from both sides. So we'll end up with x squared minus 2x plus 26 equals 0. Our a is going to be 1, our b is going to be negative 2, and our c is going to be 26, a big old number this time. Quadratic formula says x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Those were really bad. That's really bad A. There we go. That's just as bad of an A. There we go is a better A. Plug in everything, and we'll have x equals negative, and I promise this does not happen every time, but parentheses, negative 2, plus or minus the square root of parentheses, negative 2 squared, minus 4 times A is 1, times C is 26. Make sure your square root goes over the whole thing. All over 2, and in this case, A is 1. Simplifying it down, x equals negative negative 2 is positive 2, plus or minus the square root, negative 2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 1 times 26, if you put it in your calculator, is 104. All over 2 times 1 is 2. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 100 all over 2. We know that the square root of negative 100, we did this last unit. This is going to be x equals 2 plus or minus 10i, because it's a negative square root, all over 2. Again, you notice that 2, 10, and 2 are all even, so we can reduce that down to end up with 1 plus or minus 5i. And that is your final answer. That one is a little tricky because it has an imaginary root, but that's okay. We're going to do some more practice, making sure that you have this memorized for the exam and for the test on this unit. I will see you tomorrow.